Welcome and thank you for joining this TCS live webinar on supply chain resilience and adaptability in the new beginning. We've seen how the COVID-19 crisis has impacted our industry and overall impact on the global marketplace. This has led many organizations to evaluate their supply chains and rethink the ways to balance resilience and efficiency to secure the supply chain networks. So as we navigate to this new beginning, we see organizations finding ways to readjust and rise above the COVID crisis and strengthen their value chains. Our technology business unit at Tata Consulting Services has been especially focused in these endeavors, and we're driving rapid innovation and business model transformation with the aim to create best-in-class customer experiences. We're serving customers across segments, semiconductors, network technology, electronic systems, platforms, and we're offering consulting-led, cognitive-powered technology expertise, and we collaborate with our customers to co-create the next-generation products. I'm Joel Butler. I'm a supply chain engagement partner with TCS, and with us today are two supply chain experts from Tata Consultancy Services for an insightful discussion. We have Matthew Lextudis. He's the managing partner for Supply Chain as a Service. And we also have Sundar Purushothaman. He's head of the Global Advanced Planning and Logistics Services. We're going to save a block of time at the end for Q&A. So if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A field, and we will do our best to cover as many as possible following this presentation. So now, Matt, over to you to describe the changes that we are seeing and the responses generated to these changes.
Joel, thanks so much, and thank you all for joining us here today. It's great to have this opportunity to speak with you. We'll be sharing with you some perspectives as well as some real tangible actions that we're taking and clients are taking to address the new beginning. Certainly, as we look at the impact of the pandemic, it's been substantial and unprecedented, and the high-tech and communications sector has been significantly impacted. It probably doesn't make you feel any better, but studies show that the supply chains within your sector have probably been most significantly impacted, as in many other industries. However, not only are the supply chains impacted, but core operations, personnel, and revenue has been impacted. Revenue has been impacted significantly. And I think these things are probably due to the very global nature of the supply chains that we have in this industry, and exposure to multiple markets. As a result, it's not only a downside impact, but there's also an upside opportunity here to capitalize on the kinds of disruptions and changes that we're seeing. So while the initial response was to focus on responding to the crisis, the shift now is really on continuing supply chain operations in this new beginning. And what does this really mean? Essentially, as we look forward, we can tell that the fundamentals have shifted, and there will be second and third order impacts. We're going to see continual waves of opening and closing of different markets. We're going to see financial impacts to sub-tier suppliers and to other players in our ecosystems, transportation, et cetera, that we're going to have to adjust to. So the name of the game has become focusing in on resilience. And really, the challenge here is around striking the balance between those things that drive up our resilience capability and manage the exposure to risk there without unduly impacting our financial performance, right? So, historically, I think we relied heavily on a focus on business performance optimization in these global networks. Now it's more about ensuring that we are getting the proper risk-rated return of investment on our supply chain operations. The good news is that there are many things that we can do that both improve efficiency and effectiveness, while also addressing resiliency. So getting that right balance is what we'll focus on, and we'll talk about some of the different approaches that companies are taking to improve resiliency while also tackling efficiency. Supply chain is obviously front and center. This creates just a phenomenal opportunity for all of us in this business to seize the moment. Discussions around supply chain risk, supply chain resiliency are on the agenda in every board of directors, across the world. And this is an opportunity for us to capitalize on that attention and really drive the agendas that we've been working on for multiple years, because they really do come together around this topic of resiliency. And what I mean by that is, I think over the past few years we've been working to drive greater digitization and automation, more intelligence into our supply chains as strategic initiatives, right? These things have now taken on a different light and really become competitive weapons or even existential threats in the current environment. So now's the opportunity to capitalize on this and take that attention and drive our agenda in supply chain more aggressively. How do we do this? The focus really is around building purpose-oriented digital platforms that connect our partners and create greater visibility across the entire commerce community. The key levers within resiliency tend to be around things related to latency, right? So, reduction in our awareness, lag time, and response time, right? These things allow us to move quickly, right? So we see a lot of activity around increasing visibility. Introducing automation, that reduces our risks to people disruptions and allows us to create faster response times, as does the introduction of greater intelligence through AI and machine learning into supply chain. This is the time to capitalize on it. There will be winners and losers in all of this, as in any significant market disruption. In fact, we had a recent innovation forum with about 100 leading business executives across multiple industries, and we found in a survey with that group that about 30% of them experienced actual market share losses. So not only did their markets go down or perhaps even go up, they actually lost share. Well, on the other side, there was an equal amount that actually experienced market share gains. So there is downside and upside opportunity in all of this. And it's an opportunity for us to position supply chain more strategically within our organizations and really drive financial performance in a different way. And most of this is really around mobilizing to drive that supply chain resiliency model. Core to the resilience is recognizing and embracing ecosystem thinking. I think one of the things that has been driven home very, very starkly by the events of the pandemic is that supply chains are not chains at all. In fact, they're interrelated series of networks, or a network of networks, if you will. And really, the key to driving performance in this environment is around the orchestration of these networks, not only to drive efficiency and harmonization, but also to create innovation and drive new levels of value for all those ecosystem participants. So to guide the path to the future of ecosystem commerce, really, driving what we're calling ERP 4.0. This really is the optimization of multiple enterprises within an ecosystem. We've developed this maturity model to help create that construct to guide that path forward. The key characteristics of this from left to right, really are about those things that we were talking about, right? It's about the maturity and the depth of analytics, visibility, driving automation, and the ecosystem orchestration concepts into our business and the maturity of doing so. But it's a long and complex journey, with many unknowns and many technologies that are still emerging, such as blockchain and machine learning, etc. That will certainly have a role to play, but it's not necessarily always clear where they will be housed within the ecosystem. Who's going to be the operator of those things, etc. So one of the things that we really focus on here, right, is coupling this maturity model, right, the vision for where we want to get to in terms of ecosystem commerce and intelligent supply chain, with the notion of building a supply chain digital twin. Building the supply chain digital twin really allows us to build a model that we can begin to bombard with the wide range of unknowns, whether these are things related to the development of technology, if they're related to how our markets are going to unfold, if they're related to the kinds of future-facing disruptions that we may see. It allows us to build a model that we can bombard with those different scenarios and arrive at the most resilient solution. And from that, really get to building a practical roadmap to build profitable resiliency moving forward. So with that, back to you, Joel.
Thank you, Matt. Now, Sundar is going to talk to us about some examples about how firms are actually implementing and operationalizing this maturity model. So over to you, Sundar.
Thanks, Joel. It was a comprehensive detailing by Matt. This is Sundar Purushothaman, Supply Chain Practitioner, Global Head Advanced Planning and Logistics Unit at TCS. In fact, 94% of Fortune 1000 companies have reported some kind of supply chain disruption due to COVID-19. And the reality is this is not the end, and we should expect more unexpected disruptions. Hence, journey to ecosystem commerce and ERP 4.0 are highly critical, and resiliency is a competitive mandate. The good news is that the new age digital tools can support building supply chain resiliency. Some of our customers have started the adoption and are moving from recovery to restart the new beginning. And in this process, they have explored the main strategies to develop greater supply chain resilience and have identified key pillars that support them building it. First one is strategic simulation scenario planning, which helped developing potential critical scenarios, refine supply chain strategies, prioritize and take decisions to handle the disruption, and most importantly, periodically tracking, revising the scenarios has helped them in building the resiliency. Second is rapid onboarding of channel partners, suppliers, service providers, customers with minimal complexity. They included the partner's risk into their value chain assessment, segmenting, identifying their potential risk, thus helped to identify alternate pre-qualified routes, network partners, and most importantly, enable them through accelerated onboarding process. Third pillar, supporting the supply chain resiliency, is supply chain visibility and control tower. providing visibility across functions, partners, extended networks. This proved as a big advantage as central control tower gather, integrate information from variety of sources, support in taking centralized decisions and rapid approvals. Also providing end-to-end supply chain visibility and insight. And the fourth pillar is business process digital twin. By building the business process digital twin, customers are experiencing that supply chain strategists could experiment with number of key variables, test with different scenarios and contingencies. Decision makers could do scenario analysis, proactively mitigate risks before they impact the supply chain. It helps them to steer around potential bottlenecks and build a more resilient supply chain against disruptions. And we have seen our customers enabling these pillars and benefiting in building resiliency. Next, we will see examples of some of our customers who have handled these challenges and built resiliency. This client is a manufacturer and distributor of analytical instruments and reagents used to test the quality of water and other liquid solutions across the globe. They had the supply chain solutions already implemented as pre-COVID scenario. During COVID, their supply chain was heavily disrupted. Historical based demand planning lost its relevancy. Demand volatility was very high. Some of the product line had spiked in demand and some of them dipped. Their customer priorities changed and that impacted in high demand variance. Fulfillment issues increased due to the intercompany supply challenges due to regional shutdown, impacting the raw material finished good shortages. Workforce was another challenge. Handling their export base, they required specialized skills resources. Customer assessed their end-to-end value chain, daily delivery status, shipment needs, relation with specialized skill resources dependency. It was found that they had their demand plans in monthly buckets and executed monthly plan cycles, which had gaps with real-time information, changes in supply chain. What was missing was the capability of scenario planning and strategy simulations to understand the fulfillment situation with demand priorities, comparison between base plan to scenarios. Customer actioned and modified the monthly bucket plan to weekly buckets to get more granular and near real-time information, increase the frequency of the planning cycle from monthly to weekly, introduced scenario planning for demand volatility as aggressive plan, moderate and conservative plan, which gave them a good view of proactive measures that could be taken for demand fulfillment, which improved demand planning accuracy, improved service levels, it decreased their channel inventory and drove better decision making, building their resilience in supply chain. The next example is about our customer who is a world leader in manufacturing of healthcare equipments, which also included product like manufacturing of ventilators, etc. The demand spiked very high. Customer had their logistic networks optimized with lowest cost carriers with defined service levels, meeting about 98.4 on time delivery. The COVID situation blew this away. Commercial flights from US and Europe to China were drastically shut down. Due capacity constraints, freight forwarders could not honor service level commitments. The freight cost increased very high, impacted finished good and components delivery. The supply network was assessed, including regional impacts due to COVID. Alternate network options were explored. Alternate modes of delivery were qualified. Operational model was strategized. In the next slide, we will see the network diagram. The top box shows the logistics network route, which was pre-COVID situation. optimized with one freight carrier who did end-to-end material movement from the factory to the end customer. Due to supply chain disruption, the customer worked with strategy team and transformed the network as multi-leg from the single leg, introduced two cross docks, one at source location and one at destination locations, identified local carriers at source and destination locations who were responsible for consolidation pool at source and last mile delivery at the destination point. Customer hired a private charter flight which could move the material from one cross dock to the other cross dock. All these were executed in just 12 days and recovered from disruption. The key success factor was not only the strategizing alternate suppliers or carriers, but enabling an accelerated onboarding process of channel partners, segmenting, identifying their potential risks, identifying alternatives and pre-qualified routes and networks and partners. Thus, they could respond to the disruption by enabling the supply chain resilience. Next, we will see how another customer enabled their supply chain resiliency, enabled through Control Tower. Joel will be taking us through this. Joel?
Thank you, Sundar. This next case study, I think, is an excellent example of the responsiveness enabled by the end-to-end visibility of the supply chain control tower. In this instance, the firm is a global medical device manufacturer, and they had a number of serious issues hit simultaneously with the advent of COVID. First of all, their primary global distribution center was located in the Netherlands, and at the start of the crisis, there were export restrictions around any medical equipment leaving the EU. And so even though their largest market was the United States, they could not supply their largest market because of these export bans. Simultaneous with that, they saw a massive drop-off of demand for some of their product lines, particularly in the elective surgery category, while other product lines, such as their medical PPE, demand shot through the roof. So they had product where they couldn't move it. They had production plans for products that weren't desired, and they had shortages of some critical items. And what they were able to do with the control tower is, first of all, they started redirecting product flow from their manufacturing sites to a new virtual warehouse location that they set up in the United States. They set up a warehouse in Minnesota and started redirecting product flow that was normally headed towards the Netherlands to this new DC, so that they could then start to serve the U.S. market, which again was their primary market. They did a total revamp of their supply chain plan. They ratcheted down production for the slow-moving elective surgery items, and then redirected some of that capacity to some PPE. They put on Saturday and Sunday shifts to work 7 days a week around the constrained product, and then added a third shift to end up in a 7x24 manufacturing scenario for those short products. Redirected product in transit. So, for example, there was a product in Hong Kong that was direct shipped to hospitals in New York City via the control tower. And ultimately, they were able to stabilize the situation, control their inventory exposure for their slow-moving product, and wrap up capacity to meet demand on their high-moving product. And again, all of this leveraged through a global end-to-end visibility, which is some capacity that even just 18 months prior, they would not have been able to execute all of these moves in the timely manner that they did. Our next case study is of a more strategic nature, and this is again around the digital twin and the leveraging of that end-to-end visibility. So this is a capability that can be built upon the digital integration, and in this particular instance, this was a company that had grown significantly through M&A. But after each of the acquisition events, they had not gone back and rationalized their supply chain network and structure. And so they had essentially multiple legacy supply chain facilities in distribution centers. And there was a feeling that they had some redundant facilities as a result of this M&A activity. And so a digital twin was built to simulate all of the sources and destinations for all of their product flow and look at inventory forward stocking locations as well as customer service level commitments. So this was looking to do an optimization of fixed assets for the property, plant, and equipment, the working capital with the inventory associated with all of those DCs, the OPEX, including the freight cost required for the movements, and then finally the service level commitments for the customer. And as we built this digital twin and ran multiple scenarios across multiple potential future demand flows, what was found through this exercise was that about 17% of their global facilities in the distribution channel were redundant and could be eliminated, driving significant cost savings with no impact on the end customer and the visibility and the delivery lead times associated with their product line. And so this is, again, probably the next stage after securing that end-to-end visibility is then to build these modeling capabilities on top of it and proceed with the optimization of your whole end-to-end supply chain. So with that, that brings us to the end of the prepared materials. So thank you, Matt and Sundar, for sharing your great information. And now we'll move into the question and answer section of this webinar. And I'm going to start with a question for Matt. Matt, the question here, how is blockchain playing a role in technology companies in building supply chain resilience?
Thanks, Joel. Yeah, so blockchain, I think we talked a little bit earlier, right, around this being one of the emerging technologies within supply chain that particularly has an opportunity to be at the heart of how we drive ecosystem commerce and orchestration, right? As we try to work with our ecosystem partners, whether they're channel partners, transportation, other elements of the supply chain. We often run into issues related to confidentiality and around security and protecting information. And I think this is really one of the areas where blockchain can be pretty significant impact around resiliency. But it doesn't even have to be that sort of grandiose, right? An example, we're working right now with a networking company in Europe to implement a blockchain-based visibility and tracking model so that they can have forward supply chain visibility to their product as it goes through multiple third parties, right? Whether those are logistics providers, warehousing, and other channel partners. And this really helps both validate sort of product, sort of delivery, but it also creates much needed visibility to manage sort of potential disruptions out there. And there are many other use cases. So again, this is one where visibility or information security and confidentiality is a blocker to achieving the kind of collaboration we want. We can often look to blockchain solutions to take those on.
Thank you, Matt. Next question, the supply chain visibility control tower case study. Was it a consulting engagement or solution-led engagement? And if the solution was in scope, can you please specify the solution deployed there? Is there any ROI available? So the solution in that particular instance was SAP. It was the IBP control tower, and it was part of I would say it was a combination of consulting and solution engagement. The control tower was one of multiple modules implemented as part of that, and that engagement was actually in process as COVID hit, and so it was a kind of a real-time dynamic adjustment based upon that just deployed technology. And in terms of ROI, I don't have a number to give you, but I can tell you the real benefit was more in terms of just the business continuity. It was essentially the ability to much more quickly than previously turn down the tap on the products where the demand fell off, and increase the supply and reroute those products that were suddenly over allocated and really driving the major demand. So hard to put an ROI on the business continuity. I can certainly, you can calculate what the impact would have been if they weren't able to continue that, but I don't have a hard number to give you on that particular case study. So another question, and this one, Sundar, I'm going to direct it to you, if that's okay. The question is, assessing risk and responding to it is a tricky one. Can you provide some key pointers on risk assessment in the supply chain?
Sure, Joel. Thanks. If we see maybe the floods in Thailand, or the earthquake or tsunamis in Japan, or even the current pandemic, okay, sourcing of, say, even hazardous materials or various kind of challenges and risks in technology industry which disrupts supply chain. I, in fact, remember Gartner's supply chain top 25 report said that supply chain risk or compelling the leaders in the electronics OEMs to reconsider and restructure their global supply networks. Hence, risk assessment is highly critical. I would say the approach can be of 3 steps. One is plan, say monitor and respond as planned. Map your suppliers, parts and subcontractors across your multiple tiers. Quantify single point of failure. Prioritize resources and in fact, include budget for the mitigations, right? And create scenarios and evaluate potential risks. And as part of monitor, enable real-time notifications about your potentially disruptive, in fact, it should be a global events of disruption, We in fact spoke about it on visibility as a key pillar. Create virtual war rooms. That's one of the things which is happening across most of the customers during this pandemic as well. For central coordination and response, this we spoke on the control tower key pillar. Um, uh, Respond proactively, assign mitigation ownership. It's not just when we identifying mitigation prior to even having these issues, identify people for us a mitigation ownership, uh, set risk thresholds for recovery, define new metrics and track them, um, take actions accordingly, and I would say refine those actions based on the change in priorities and continue the cycle until recovery and stabilization.
Thank you, Sundar. Matt, a question for you. Traditional global lean supply chain has posed increasing impact in fulfillment during COVID. Is regional sourcing a potential solution for these lean supply chains?
Thanks for the question, Joel. Yeah, so this is one of those things that I think we talked about a little bit earlier on, right? Was this trade-off between creating a globally cost optimized and sort of efficiency optimized supply chain, versus sort of perhaps more agile regional constructs. I think this is it's a complex question, right? And one that has a lot of sort of different factors that come into play. Certainly in high tech and communications, we're pretty dependent on Asia because of the concentration of manufacturing there and some of the cost advantages. So not all of those can be traded away. And I think this is one of those areas where digital twins can really help. It can allow us to really take a look at the trade-off between time and cost and redundancy, right? Because regional plays are really largely about that, right? They're about sort of collapsing response time and creating redundancy, right? The trade-off to that, right, is the additional cost and complexity and potential efficiency issues in the supply chain, and frankly, in some cases, just practicality, right, of the availability of sources of supply around the regions. So it can be, I think it's one of those things that we ought to take a look at, as a part of a holistic solution for taking on resiliency. I think the good news is that, again, there's a lot of things that can be done without taking on the structural changes, but we shouldn't ignore them either. And the structural changes, I think can be things that, if done right, can really bring some benefit. And I think the key is to focus in on those where they're most sort of strategically relevant, right, to creating resiliency. So having to do either with regions where we feel most susceptible to disruptions, either from logistics or continuity of supply. But we can also look at the other side of it, right, which is that investing in sort of deeper relationships with a smaller supply base, right, can actually pay higher dividends, right, if the appropriate kinds of risk mitigation strategies and approaches to providing continuity of supply and agility to respond are put into place, that can be actually a better strategy. And it allows you to really concentrate on investing in those elements of visibility and collaboration, right, amongst a smaller subset. So good classic consultant answer if it depends, but it certainly can be and should be part of a comprehensive approach to resiliency. And we're definitely seeing folks evaluating even within Asia and other low-cost regions, right? Alternative sources of supply for contract manufacturing and even for components. So we should definitely take a look at that as part of the solution.
Right. Thank you, Matt. Sundar, the question here is the complexity of sorting and routing of high-tech parts is always a challenge. Can you address this or speak to this overcoming this complexity?
Sure, Joel. Thanks for the question. I would say this goes very close to what Matt answered, for the previous question, right? So identifying supplies and alternate, which we also spoke about as one of the pillars where we mentioned about the rapid onboarding of channel partners. What I would say is the supply chain managers, the planners, all stakeholders should use a central supply chain platform that integrates with inventory management, order tracking systems from suppliers, manufacturers, and distributors in the technology supply chain. This makes it easier to understand any bottlenecks, any kind of order shortages, or other issues with, say, the part manufacturers or the distribution network. Take advantage of, say, the machine learning capabilities, the AI modeling, to determine the likely future demand for the parts, the high-tech parts. Work with the product developers to break it down exactly at what components are needed, at what time it is needed, so that the collaboration can help. Collaborate, build forecast models so that you can set appropriate inventory levels with your manufacturers, track where the technology materials and parts as a control tower. This can help with route optimization and even in production line scheduling.
Thank you, Sundar. Just looking at the clock, I would like to thank everyone for tuning into this session, and we all hope that you have found the discussion interesting and insightful. If there are any more questions, or if you'd like to connect with us, you can please write to the email address on the screen. And again, really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for joining us today. Wish you a wonderful day and evening, and please, everyone, stay safe. Again,